Hey guys, in this video I'll be comparing Chris Bumstead and Nick Walker in the ultimate mass versus class comparison. Since Chris just competed for the first time and the last time in the open division, I thought why not compare arguably the most aesthetic open competitor with the freakiest, most densely muscled competitor. I think this should make for a very fun comparison, and let me know in the comments who you have winning. If you guys enjoy these videos though, a like and sub would really be awesome. And with all that being said, let's break down this comparison. Alright, the first pose, the front double, is a real toss-up between these two. On one hand, you have Chris, who presents one of the best X-frames in bodybuilding history, complete with those wide-swept quads, flaring lats, and a very tiny waist. His arms are his Achilles heel in this comparison, though, because he's going up against the man with the best arms currently. Now, Nick utterly demolishes Chris in the arms, there's no doubt about that. However, Chris does do the same to Nick in the silhouette and the aesthetics. Surprisingly, Chris isn't really getting outsized by a large margin. However, there is no doubt that he is losing key areas like the arms, and doesn't really appear as sharp or dry as Nick in the quads. As much as I like his aesthetic appeal, I think I would have to give this one to Nick. He's too dry, too massive, and has the muscle where it counts. Thankfully for Chris, the front lat spread is a pose that is heavily reliant on one structure. Here it's like he's teaching a masterclass on how to hit the pose, presenting perfectly developed lats and a great set of delts and arms, a nice chest, and proportional separated legs. He's definitely not as shredded as Nick in the legs, however he's got significantly more sweep on them, along with a phenomenal upper body. Nick really does look like a barrel, I'm sorry to say it, with his wide waist being where my eyes are drawn to first. He does have some great individual body parts like his chest, arms, and even the lats. However, his shape is very unpleasing, and his structure really does not suit him in this pose. This is definitely a take-home shot for Chris, which really isn't a surprise considering he arguably has a top 5 front lat spread of all time. Speaking of top 5 poses, Chris's side chest is also in contention for one of the best ever. Even without a proper off-season or quote-unquote open size, he's got a thicker chest, a more impressive side leg, and better proportions all around. Sure, Nick does have a drier quality to his side leg, however, Chris's structure and near-perfect lines really draws my attention. That said, Nick also brings all the qualities you'd want to see from an open bodybuilder in this pose, presenting a massive arm and delt, a really impressive side leg, and top-tier condition. His midsection could be a bit tighter, however, I don't really see that as a significant issue. So who would I go with here? Well, I'm certainly biased when it comes to Chris in the side chest, which definitely does influence my preference, but I do think that his proportions, conditioning, and muscularity are perfect, whereas Nick does have some tiny, seemingly insignificant flaws that do matter when things are this close. Do let me know in the comments though, who do you prefer? Like I said, I would maybe go with Chris, however, Nick probably should win over him. The rear double is actually a very interesting pose because it's way closer than I would have thought. Chris is actually doing battle in the back, possibly presenting his back in a more favorable light compared to Nick. He leans back, which shadows the lower back area, creating the illusion of more depth. In contrast, Nick doesn't lean all that far back, which does make the lower area appear less dense and developed. While the backs may appear close though, everything else really isn't, as Nick smokes Chris in the delts, arms, and the legs. Nick's hamstrings and glutes are far superior when it comes to detail and development, and his arms and shoulders look twice as big. Chris may have one of the best, most complete rear doubles in classic physique history, however, against Nick he really does look weak. The rear lat spread is a lot closer than the last pose, mainly because Nick's upper body advantage is non-existent. Here, I'd actually say that Chris is winning slightly in the back, due to his superior width in the lats and thicker looking traps. Now, he may not be as dry in the upper body, which is why he doesn't convincingly win upstairs. However, he's winning nonetheless. Looking downstairs, though, we see that it's a clear win for Nick once again. The disparity between their hamstrings and glutes is really jaw-dropping, with Nick having a level of development and refinement that not many can match in the history of bodybuilding. With that said, I think that I'd give the overall pose to Nick, since he is the most complete from head to toe, whereas Chris has a clear weakness in the lower body. The side tricep has always pleasantly surprised me for Nick because he always manages to look very aesthetic. Considering that he is one of the worst midsections at the highest level, Here he actually does a really good job of showing off the detail while controlling and tapering the midsection. His massive arms, great side leg, and delt are all very impressive as well. However, I think that the highlight is always the contrast from his wide waist in the front shots to the small, controlled, and even pleasant-looking midsection in the side tricep. Compared to Chris, I'd actually say that he is definitely better all around. While Chris may win the side chest narrowly, here he isn't posed perfectly, which hurts him big time. He looks scrunched and closed off, and it doesn't really flow as well as he did previously, which is actually interesting because I've seen him hit a really good side tricep in the classic physique division. Now, this could come down to a lack of practicing the shot or trying to appear denser on stage. However, overall, I think that he would be losing to Nick, with Nick looking pretty good. The ab and thigh, however, is a pretty clear victory for Chris, mainly due to his structural superiority and his far more pleasing midsection. Don't get me wrong, Nick has looked good in the ab and thigh in the past. However, at his last showing, which is the New York Pro, this was easily his worst ab and thigh to date. His waist looks so blocky and his abs are faded and split, and his quads lack the necessary sweep to compensate for his massive upper half. Although Chris is not the widest guy ever, his small waist and wide lats do improve the perceived width and hide his somewhat narrower structure. Then you look at the nicely separated full and swept quads, and it's really game over. Chris is way better here than Nick, and I think anyone with eyes can see that. The last pose, the most muscular, is shockingly close. I'm really impressed with how freaky Chris looks, especially when it comes to the traps and the arm delt separation. He has those deep, intricate lines across every inch of his physique, which can't really be said for Nick. Now, Nick might have those massive arms and delts and crazy vascularity. However, he doesn't have that finely tuned, deeply separated lines that Chris might have. Then again, he is so much larger than Chris, which ultimately might be Chris's downfall. Remember, this is open bodybuilding after all, where size normally is on top, and this is especially the case in the most muscular. For this reason, I think that Nick would probably take this pose. However, I am more drawn to Chris than Nick here. Anyways, that does it for this comparison. To summarize, I had Chris winning 3 poses while Nick won 5, with Nick winning in a rather dominant manner. Do let me know in the comments down below your thoughts on this comparison, and I will see you on the next one. Thanks for watching.